All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. It looks like Derek Carr's time with the Las Vegas Raiders could be coming to an end. Raiders head coach Josh McDaniels made the announcement yesterday that Carr would be benched for Las Vegas's final two games of this regular season, in spite of the fact that the team is still mathematically alive to make the postseason. Carr will be inactive for the Raiders' final two games, and he will make way for Jarrett Stidham at quarterback. Now, reports are that this decision came from Raiders team owner Mark Davis, and if you look at the press conference with Josh McDaniel talking about the decision to bench Carr, he looked very uncomfortable, which makes you believe that, yes, indeed, this decision came from up top. Now, of course, it's a interesting scenario for Carr and the Raiders heading into the offseason. There was a very small window for the Raiders to make a decision on Carr, be able to release him and move away from the contract scot free. It's like things like 3 days after the Super Bowl. Otherwise, his $40 million is going to be guaranteed for next season. So if you're the silver and black, you have to make a decision. But I'm going to say it like this. Obviously, benching Carr is going to give him the opportunity to continue his NFL career in another city. And you could say what you want about Derek Carr. He's had flashes where he looked like a solid quarterback, and he's had, moments that just left you scratching your head. I mean, the record 63 and 79 as an NFL starter with the Raiders, 217 touchdowns, the most in Raiders franchise history, 99 interceptions. He's currently leads the NFL in interceptions this year. He's thrown for more than 35,000 yards, which is the most in Raiders franchise history. And he's also um, completed nearly 64.5% of his passes. And the Raiders, they've only made the playoffs 2 seasons with Derek Carr. But at the end of the day, the Raiders deserve a lot of blame for this. Josh McDaniels, the head coach, and of course, Mark Davis, the team owner. Obviously, McDaniels is in his first season with the Raiders. I'm going to get to that soon. But a lot of this falls on Mark Davis because you look at it, the Raiders have not always done right by Derek Carr. You go back to when Carr came into the league in 2014, he was a second round pick that year. The team made Khalil Mack their first round pick that year. And of course, Mack in his time with the Raiders was one of the better edge rushers in the NFL. Actually became defensive player of the year. You move on from Jack Del Rio in favor of John Gruden. What's one of the first things that John Gruden does? He trades Khalil Mack to the Chicago Bears. You go out there after Derek Carr, early in the early portion of his career shows you that he can be a franchise quarterback. Okay, you come back and draft Amari Cooper, and it's not that long before Cooper and Derek Carr had a great chemistry on the field together, and hence the whole ACDC thing. But then it wasn't too long before, guess what? When it came time to pay Amari Cooper, the Raiders are trading him to the Dallas Cowboys. You think about it, throughout Carr's time with the Raiders, whether it be Oakland or Vegas, the Raiders have typically had one of the worst defenses in the NFL. So again, I'm not saying that Derek Carr is blameless on this because he has had some moments where it really leaves you to scratch your head. Like, you know what, you're better than this, and yet and still you're playing like this. So I'm not going to sit up here and make Derek Carr a martyr. But at the same time, the Raiders organization is not blameless for this. You think back to 2016, Carr was having his best season of his brief career at that point, was in the MVP discussions until the leg injury ended his season prematurely. The Raiders did not have his services in the playoffs. They had to go with Matt McGloin, and of course, they were one and done. Came back the next season, it just never came together for this team. And before you knew it, Jack Del Rio was getting fired and paving the way for John Gruden. And of course, what happens when you bring in a new head coach? if that quarterback is not your guy, you're not going to be completely sold on him. And I don't think that John Gruden was really completely sold on Derek Carr, but things looked like they were finally coming together with John Gruden and Derek Carr last year. The Raiders got off to that strong start, and before you know it, John Gruden got fired amid controversy. Now, with all of that said and done, Mark Davis then promoted Rich Bisaccia as the interim head coach, and the team did respond to Bisaccia. They went 10-7. They got to the playoffs, and they were within a whisker of knocking off the Cincinnati Bengals in the first round. Now, I will say this, and I've been critical of Mark Davis for this before, and I'm going to keep being critical of Mark Davis for this. I feel like Mark Davis made a mistake in moving on from Rich Bisaccia because the bottom line is this team and I'm not trying to like downplay Rich Bisaccia in any way, shape, or form, but this team responded to Rich Bisaccia and they did it in a very good way. And I think that Mark Davis made the mistake in trying to go for the sizzle in a name in Josh McDaniels. And the thing is this: number one, Josh McDaniels is not the boy genius that people want to believe, or some people want to believe that he is. Secondly, when are teams around the NFL going to stop going to Foxborough and hiring Bill Belichick assistant coaches to be head coaches? Because more often than not, it does not work out. And of course, Josh McDaniels looked like a genius as the offensive coordinator for a good chunk of his time with the New England Patriots. I can be a genius at offensive coordinator, and I've never stepped on an NFL field when Tom Brady is the quarterback. It's just like the same scenario where we see quarterback coaches who were in Indy or Denver when Peyton Manning was there, quarterback coaches who were in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. They're getting jobs, and then people are wondering why they can't get it done. Well, guess what? Look at the quarterbacks that they're working with. I can look like a genius with Aaron Rodgers. I can look like a genius with Peyton Manning. I can look like a genius with Tom Brady. And on top of that, let's not forget Josh McDaniels' previous track record. This is why I'm not letting him off the hook with this. You go back to his time with the Denver Broncos, won his first 5 or 6 games there in Denver, and very quickly it evaporated. Remember, he got fired in year 2 after the Broncos got off to the 3-9 start. And this was a guy who quickly ran Jay Cutler, a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback, out of town in Denver. And then let's not forget in 2010, it was Josh McDaniels who traded back into the first round to take Tim Tebow, a quarterback who everybody thought had a 4th round grade at best. This is the quarterback evaluator that we're talking about here in Josh McDaniels when he doesn't have the services of Tom Brady. Now we have a situation where the Raiders are going to look at Jarrett Stidham. Really? I mean, the thing is this: we saw Jarrett Stidham briefly with the New England Patriots in 2020. It was nothing to write home about. Jarrett Stidham is not a starting quarterback in the NFL. Jarrett Stidham is a 3rd string quarterback in the NFL. And that's not to disrespect him. He can make a career out of it. But the bottom line is, Jarrett Stidham is not the future for the Raiders. And my thing is this: you benching Derek Carr right here when you still are mathematically alive. What message are you showing your team? But then again, this Raiders team under Josh McDaniels has disappointed all year long. 4 times. The Raiders had a double-digit lead at halftime this year, and they lost all 4 of those games. It wasn't Derek Carr's fault that this team was not prepared to take on the Indianapolis Colts and Jeff Saturday as their head coach. Jeff Saturday was making his head coaching debut following the firing of Frank Reich. Let's not forget, Frank Reich, pardon me, Jeff Saturday had no prior experience in the NFL other than playing center. And if you go back and watch that game, Colts and Raiders, and the Raiders were at home at that for that game, Josh McDaniels got out coached. Again, I put this on Mark Davis because he was the one who hired Josh McDaniels in the first place, not Derek Carr. He was the one who decided to move on from Rich Bisaccia, not Derek Carr. And you look at Mark Davis, obviously he has to count his pennies now because guess what? He's still going to have to pay John Gruden. He's obviously paying Josh McDaniels. And at the end of the day, he's looking to save a few pennies right here. But the bottom line is this move to bench Derek Carr is going to speak volumes and it's going to cascade through your locker room. I don't see any scenario where Josh Jacobs, who is having a career year carrying the football, is going to be back with the Raiders next year. We saw the Raiders go out there and make the big time move to acquire Pro Bowl wide receiver Devontae Adams from the Green Bay Packers this past off season. Of course, Carr and Adams had that chemistry together going back to their time playing football together at Fresno State. It's only going to be a matter of time before Devontae Adams wants himself a new NFL home. To me, I think this Raiders team as a whole continues to be a fiasco. And it's unfortunate because there are a lot of fans that are probably under the age of 30, definitely under the age of 25, not giving away my age here, but nonetheless, they don't know what the Raiders franchise has meant to the NFL because all they have seen for the most part is bad football. The Raiders were a corner and are a cornerstone NFL franchise. And if you go back, obviously in the 60s, the Raiders were a part of the AFL, but you go back to the 70s, the iconic 70s, 1980s, but definitely the 1970s. John Madden as a head coach, Ken Stabler, Clarence Davis, of course, that tremendous offensive line, Gene Upshaw, um, um, Art Shell, excuse me there for a minute, Jim Otto. I could just keep going right down the list. Henry Lawrence, Dave Dalby. You think about the defense, Ted Hendricks, John Matuzak, Phil Filippiano, um, Willie Brown, George Atkinson, Jack Tatum, so many others. And the Raiders were the fabric of the NFL. And of course, in the 80s, they won a couple of more Super Bowls. And even into the early 90s, the Raiders were a revered organization. And they have gotten away from that. And it seems like even going back to their final days in Oakland, every single time that the Raiders appear to be giving you a glimmer of hope, they take a couple of steps back. And that is what they continue to do. This is why I am not going to put all of this on Derek Carr. Again, he is not blameless in this scenario, but I am not putting all of this on Derek Carr in this scenario. For me, it just looks like a bad NFL franchise that is going to continue to be a bad NFL franchise. Now, for Derek Carr, he's going to be 32 years of age in March. Still has a couple of solid years in him. Obviously, Carr is not a Hall of Fame quarterback by any stretch of the imagination, but in the right scenario, I really think he could be a solid contributor for another NFL team. Now, where will Carr's next NFL home be? Obviously, we have to wait, make sense. Some names I think that you're going to hear thrown around in regards to teams. At the top of the list, I think is going to be the New York Jets because I say that because you look at the Jets scenario. Obviously, they're ready to move on from Zach Wilson, and rightfully so. Um, Mike White is their starting quarterback, and Mike White has shown flashes when he plays, but the bottom line is Mike White has not shown the ability to go out there and stay healthy. And you look at this Jets team, you're going to get Brees Hall back next year running the football. This is a young team. Defensively, they are a top 10 unit, could possibly be a top 5 unit. They have talent at wide receiver, and you saw that when Mike White was inserted into the starting lineup as opposed to Zach Wilson. So, with that said, you can get a veteran quarterback to come in there and help it all come together. But does Derek Carr have what it takes to play in the New York City area? That's going to be the big thing because you look at some of the down plays that Derek Carr has made over his career. It's a little bit different in Oakland and a little bit different in Vegas. You go to the Big Apple, they will let you have it. So that's going to be interesting to see if that were the case. The Washington Commanders, this is a team that definitely needs a quarterback. They made the trade for Carson Wentz from the Indianapolis Colts last offseason. It's not working out because it's been a revolving door for Commanders head coach Ron Rivera between Carson Wentz and, of course, Tyler Heineke. At this point of Carson Wentz's career, he's not a starter in the NFL. He's a backup. Tyler Heineke can show you flashes, but he's a guy that could come in for 4 or 5 games when your starting quarterback is on the mend. And then, of course, you got the Commanders' defensive coordinator, Jack Del Rio, the head coach who did draft Derek Carr with the Raiders. And I guarantee you he'll go to bat for him if the Commanders really want to go that route. Also, on top of that, Ron Rivera is a guy that he's probably looking at his team and he knows that he's just a quarterback away from being more of a contender in the NFC. So would Carr be the guy to get him to that point? Possibly. Then also another team, and I'm just throwing this out there. Some people might agree with me, some people may not. The Indianapolis Colts, and I really hope that this is not the scenario because the Colts need to start over at quarterback. They need to stop with this band-aid stuff at the quarterback position. We saw it a couple of years ago with Philip Rivers, then Carson Wentz, and now Matt Ryan. It ain't working out. Indianapolis needs to go out there, find themselves a young stud in the draft, develop him, and build off of that, and leave the veteran journeyman be. So I think at the end of the day, I think the best fits for me for Derek Carr would be the Jets or the Commanders next season. And if I had my say, it would be the Jets. Not saying that he would make the Jets a Super Bowl contender, but I would believe in Derek Carr at quarterback for the Jets right now compared to either Mike White or Zach Wilson. At the end of the day, like I said, the Raiders just never did right by Derek Carr. And this is what happens when you have a bad organization. Jared Stidham at quarterback is not going to provide any juice, any life behind anybody. You look at it once again, NFL teams just need to stay away from Foxborough. Josh McDaniels, Matt Patricia, we can go down the list of Bill Belichick flameouts at the quarterback position. This was a bit of a shock for a lot of people, but at the end of the day, it's one of those where it's a business. There is no such thing as loyalty. We know that football is no different from any other business in the world. And of course, for Derek Carr, unfortunately, he found that out the hard way. Now he's going to have an opportunity to find another NFL home, find another team, find somebody that wants him, find somebody who feels that he can contribute to their team for 2023 and the coming years. For the Raiders, do they go in the draft or do they go in free agency looking for a quarterback? I mean, the rumors have already started as far as Tom Brady, the current Tampa Bay Buccaneers starting quarterback, being a free agent. Would the Raiders want to woo him west? Of course, Josh McDaniels is there, but if that's the case, if you're the Raiders, would you want to move heaven and earth to get a guy that probably maybe has 1 year left in the tank? Would you try to go all in for 1 year to try to win the Super Bowl with Tom Brady? I'm just speaking hypothetically. Would it be worth it? We'd have to wait and see. But nonetheless, what the Raiders are right now is a fraction of what they have been to the NFL, a fraction of what they have meant to the NFL. And again, the legend that is Josh McDaniels when it comes to futility continues because this Raiders team was better than the Raiders team that made the playoffs last year. You go out there and get a Chandler Jones to be a bookend to Max Crosby. You bring in Patrick Graham as your defensive coordinator. It's not working out. You go out there and get Josh McDaniels. It's not working out. Darren Waller's been hurt. Hunter Renfro's been hurt. And of course, Josh McDaniels continues to be Josh McDaniels. He's not an NFL head coach. These Patriots assistant head coaches try to go out there and do everything like Bill Belichick. It works for Belichick. It does not work for everybody else. And we saw this before where it didn't take long before Josh McDaniels pissed off Jay Cutler in Denver, pissed off Brandon Marshall, pissed off a lot of people within that organization. And again, not all of this about Derek Carr is on Josh McDaniels, but it's still the effect of him. So I'm looking at the Raiders right now. It's unfortunate. They're a joke. Derek Carr has to move on. The Raiders have to move on. And this is an interesting dynamic for both Carr and the Silver and Black heading into the off season. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you are on Twitter, Please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off, and I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.